Hello and welcome to She the People's Women's Writers Fest. We live in a world which is disruptive, ambiguous, uncertain, and dynamic. In this complex world, we need a more evolved style of leadership that moves away from the traditional command and control leadership to people centered leadership. Yes, our final session today is titled Reimagining Leadership, and we have with us three women who have been breaking the glass ceiling. Ruchira Chaudhary's book, Coaching the Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership, has just been released in India and globally. Ruchira, in her book, articulates why leadership is not about controlling, but empowering and enabling people. She talks about why the new world reality needs leaders who are people centric. Ruchira calls these leaders real leaders. She believes that women leaders in particular have an important role to play in this fast changing world. According to her, coaching has the power to really enable, elevate, and empower women leaders. However, Ruchira is cognizant of the fact that while the purpose of coaching for both genders is the same, women may often need a more customized approach. Since coaching is not gender specific, both men and women, if they are in position to do so, can and should mentor budding women leaders. Ruchira straddles the academic and the corporate world as a leading executive coach, affiliate faculty at top tier business schools, and founder of boutique consulting firm focused on organizational strategy solutions. She has over 2 decades of leadership experience in emerging markets in Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. We also have with us Maggie Hansen Muse, someone Ruchira refers to as her mentors, a second generation senior foreign service officer. She is a member of Women Corporate Directors Governance Committee and has served in an ex officio capacity on the boards of AmCham Singapore, Costa Rica, Peru, Colombia, and the Colombian Council of American Enterprises. She is currently the faculty chair, USDOC Assistant Professor Leadership Program at National Defense University, Eisenhower School. We welcome you, Maggie. The conversation today will be moderated by Sonu Bhasin, a leading author herself and one of the early senior women professionals in the industry. Sonu is an independent director on boards of well known companies. She is the founder of Families and Businesses, a platform for family businesses, and the editor of Families and Business magazine. She has been named as one of the global 100 most influential individuals for family enterprises in 2020. I welcome all three of you from on behalf of She the People, and without wasting much time, I'll request Sonu to take over the session for moderating.
Thank you, Deepshika, and welcome everyone to this last session of Women Writers Fest of She the People. And I'm delighted to be in conversation with Ruchira and Maggie on the topic of reimagining leadership. Now, when I think of leadership and when I ask people about what are some of the adjectives that they associate with leadership, there's a whole variety of adjectives that are used, and some of them are competent, influential, ideal, superior, decisive, passionate, accountable. But for me, and I do want to share with you that for me, the adjective that stands out for me is effective leadership, because leaders have to deal with different situations. They have to deal with different people. The followers change. And therefore, in a sense, that they have to reimagine leadership in order to be effective. And God knows that, the last year has given all leaders ample opportunity to reimagine, their leadership. And it is interesting to see leaders who have succeeded and leaders who have floundered. And therefore, the conversation ahead promises to be interesting. And let me just start off on a more personal question rather than leadership question. But Ruchira, you've said and you've told me that you hold Maggie as your mentor. Now, I'm not asking Maggie whether she had a choice in it or not. I assume she. But can you tell us about how this relationship came through, and what are some of the learnings that you've had about yourself as a leader from a leader like Maggie? Ruchira?
Thank you. Thank you, Sonu, and for so eloquently framing that question. I do think Maggie did have a choice, incidentally, in being that mentor. Um, I so just to sort of put more context to this story, I met Maggie several years ago. I can't say I was this young, dynamic, because I'm still not that old, relatively speaking, but I just about sort of started. I was in the what we call the mid-career zone, and I was invited for the Women Corporate Directors meeting in Singapore. That's where I lived for the last 14 years. And I happened to be introduced to Maggie. Maggie was then the Minister Counselor for Trade and Commerce for ASEAN, and she's been U.S. government representative. And I was taken to this meeting, and I met Maggie for the first time. And what I've learned from somebody like Maggie was that she's a true giver and a true connector. Having met her very briefly in that meeting, maybe it was just my charm, I don't know. She took a real shine to me, or maybe she does that for everybody. But she was somebody who went out of her way to connect me to so many people in Singapore. So, I was a frequent visitor to the US Consular High Commissioner's place. I was invited for so many leading women events. And for the tenure that she was in Singapore, Maggie went out of her way. She stretched those boundaries to ensure that she was shining the light on me.
Yeah.
As things happened, she left the shores of Singapore and went back to the US. We lost touch over the years. And then 2 years ago, completely from nowhere, I get this email in my inbox. Maggie, again, out of the blue, saying, "Oh, we are having this Women for Impact conference in Bhutan, and it's being partly sort of sponsored by the royal family. The best and the brightest women have to be there. Of course, you're coming. Why ever not would you be there?" So I'm looking at that email and I'm thinking to myself, I have a young child, I do have work, but it's Maggie, right? And when Maggie beckons you, you drop everything. So there I was. And I'll let Maggie tell you the story after that. But it was perhaps the most enriching 1 week of my life, attending that Women for Impact conference in Bhutan, which, thanks
Yeah.
to my dear friend and mentor,
Yeah.
I had the pleasure and privilege of experiencing.
Yeah, yeah. So Maggie, now to you, uh, you meet a lot of people, I am sure, as part of your work. How do you decide who will you mentor? So, what as a leader, do you identify people? How do you see the hidden potential in people so that you can decide that yes, this one is going to be part of my mentee team and this one is not. So, what does a leader look for in mentees?
Morning, everyone, and thank you so much for including me. Ruchira left out a part that I think is really important. I was born in India, in Calcutta, as a matter of fact, and that's probably one of the reasons I looked at, because I felt a connection in that way. I actually, during my career, served in India twice in New Delhi, and very happy while I was there. And so that's another reason why I wanted to do this program, because I love India and enjoy all things Indian. My parents are not Indian, but I still feel very connected to India. One of the things I look for, to answer your question, are people who are reflective and people who listen. I look for people who make mistakes. Really important that you make a mistake and that you learn from that mistake. People who make mistakes are people who make mistakes are people who learn. And as Ruchira Kira says in her, it can be a transformational experience because the coach is going to learn from the coachee, and obviously the person mentored is going to learn something. It's a two-way street. Mentoring is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. I come away from the experience. So that's sort of my philosophy. And so I really look for someone that I can connect with and who's willing to extend themselves as well. We just had a lot of fun and we became friends more than anything. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And thank you for that. And some of the things that you've said actually connect a lot when you said that you look for people who listen, who are ready to make mistakes, who admit that they are vulnerable, and that and over a period of time, you and Ruchira became friends. Now, these are all qualities that actually are indicative of a good coach. A coach also has to be willing to listen. A coach has to be willing to allow for mistakes. And then it's only then that they can bring about a transformation in the leadership. So, how, Ruchira, do you want to talk about how you cannot be a great leader without being a leader coach?
Absolutely.
The qualities are all enmeshed and intermingled. Do you want to, take us
Sure.
all through this?
Sure. In fact, I think you said it really well. You cannot be a good leader without being a good coach. And the whole premise of the book is that the best in the business do that by building those reservoirs of human capital. They do that, they achieve those numbers by enabling people at the same time. So these are
Yeah,
not mutually exclusive things. You can do both. You can be a truly uncommon leader, and you can be that leader while taking people along in the journey by
yeah,
lifting them and elevating them as you elevate yourself and your organizations. And the whole premise of that is when you shine the light on others, you also shine brighter. So how I try to sort of decode that is that I've talked about coaching is that secret sauce or that secret code that unlocks uncommon leadership. And what does that really mean? It means that uh, in the yesteryears, I think Deepshika started very eloquently by saying the command and control culture no longer holds good. We know that we have to now look at a more evolved style of leadership where we have to take people along. But what does that truly mean? What's despite the acknowledgement that leadership today is different. It's about harnessing the collective intelligence of your people. It's about seeking many voices. Yet every time we're in the throes of crisis, we revert to that style where we constantly tell people what to do. And the whole premise of being a good leader, an uncommon leader, as I say, is about asking people, not telling them.
yeah,
And coaching, the way I've described it, is about maximizing the potential and the performance of people. And you do that through a series of self enabling and non directive conversations.
yeah,
So, at a very simple level, you say, you don't tell people, this is how I did it. Oh, by the way, Sonu is a fantastic, successful leader, and that's how she did it. So, that's the way you need to do it. No. The difference here is you actually surrender a degree of control. You give people the space to think for themselves. And as Maggie said, you let them fail. You tell them upfront that it's okay to make those mistakes. And this
yeah,
iteration of trial and error is what makes them better leaders. So,
yeah,
uncommon leaders support this. And that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
all
so
about.
you said that you allow people to fail, and it's a question of trial and error. I think, and Maggie, this question's for you. That the last year actually saw a lot of opportunities for trial and errors for leaders. And some time back, there were all these WhatsApp messages, and Twitter and social media was full of the fact that in the world, the leaders who stood out in handling the pandemic were women leaders. So you've seen a lot of the world. You've interacted with a lot of world leaders. Can you talk to us about how, in your opinion, have the leaders navigated the crisis during the last year? And really, have the women been more effective than the men? Do we have empirical data as well about it?
That is such a fabulous question, because one of the things I did last year at Eisenhower School was create a course in transformational leadership. And we studied women. We studied how women approached problems. And to riff off of what Ruchi was just saying, empathy was that seemed to separate these fabulous leaders. And men have it as well. It's not just women, but these fabulous good coaches have reservoirs of empathy that are tremendous. If you take a look at some of the videos of Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand, she talks to you in a way that doesn't belittle you, that doesn't make you feel small, but she touches your heart when she tells you what to feel safe. Angela Merkel has that quality as well. Even though she's extremely scientific, she's extremely professional, very dignified, but she has a way of communicating, taking the narrative and making the message touch you. A good coach needs to have a narrative, needs to create analogies, needs to have a power of words so that they touch in a way that makes them empathetic. Franklin D. Roosevelt and Teddy Roosevelt had those qualities. John F. Kennedy. I want to give you a variety of people so that it's not just women that have that ability. Men also have that ability. But empathy is a key ingredient, and Ruth reads that in her book several times. It's very important for a good coach to have that ability to be empathetic. Thank you.
Yeah. So, it's somewhat of a stereotype to say that it's the women who have more empathy. And therefore, if we take that logic forward, then it is to say that women make better coaches. But Ruchira, you've discussed in your book that women need coaching as much as they are able to give coaching, and maybe they need a little more coaching than the men do. Can you tell us why, in your opinion, women need more coaching, since specifically they intuitively also understand coaching? I mean, women end up women are coaches at home without them even realizing that they're coaching. So why is it, in your opinion, that women need coaching more than men?
Thank you. That's an amazing question. I'll just rephrase it a little bit. Women need coaching, but they perhaps need as much coaching as their male counterparts. The difference is, while the journey um, is the same, right? The destination is about making them more capable, making them a better version of themselves. The approach to getting there perhaps needs to be more customized for women. And when I started writing the book, one of the things very early on, I tried to um, really define what it meant to coach somebody. What were the key outcomes? So, what you do for somebody when you spend that time coaching them, bringing out the best in them, and we distilled it in what a simple model, which is 4 C's. So, when you coach somebody, you give them clarity to go forward. You give them consciousness, which is, we call that self-awareness. You make them more capable, understandably. And the 4th C is giving them confidence. So I'm really, really passionate about this bit. I think women truly need an extra dose of that confidence. So, as a leader coach, the one thing I truly recommend and advise my coaches, the leaders that I work with, is please go that extra mile to, to give more confidence, more self belief to your women coaches. Let me explain this a little bit more. Now, despite all the progress and despite some of us being very successful, and I say us because that includes people like me and Maggie and everybody else, and Sheryl Sandberg, who's endorsed my book, despite despite being, I guess, having all the sort of the right lineage and success, we constantly are plagued by self-doubt. We get these fantastic breaks, and then we ask ourselves, are we worthy of it? We get fantastic assignments, and our first thought is, was that a mistake? Am I an imposter? Will I be outed? It's also commonly referred to as the imposter syndrome. So that's the part I truly urge leaders to focus on, because study after study, research after research is telling us that men are not afraid to lean in, even if they're sort of half prepared or almost there. Women, unfortunately, will not raise their hand, they will not apply for jobs, they will not apply for promotions if they feel that they're less than perfect. And this less than perfect uh, obsession is what holds us back. So
Yeah.
be those leader coaches and take them forward with
Yeah.
an extra dose of confidence.
Yeah, yeah. So, now we're talking about coaching in specific business environment, having moved away from, the larger 60,000 feet context. So, Maggie, the question to you is that when we are talking of coaching in specific business context, having having hands-on experience of managing a business or running a business, is that actually a requirement, prerequisite for somebody to be able to coach? Is experience necessary? And therefore, is this one of those professions where age is actually an asset?
I think that it gives you more credibility. I think that people and willing to listen to you. It certainly helped me when I came in as a new professor into my environment. People were more willing to listen to my suggestions about what was going on outside in the real world when I was teaching the brand new course, because I'd lived it. I could give real life examples. It's difficult for people to accept academic advice, practitioner versus somebody who's just written about it. So I think it's more practical. You can rest on your academic laurels, but I think it's if you have actually spent some time doing it. To get to take your question a little bit further, it's a question, Sonu. Thank you. You have me thinking a bit on the fly here, because I'd like to parse it out a little bit more. In our current workplace, we have generations, and that can be trying at times, because at the top end, you have people that go, it's because we've always done it, and at the bottom end, you have, well, there's an app for that. And in the middle, you have people going, oh my God, what are we going to do about these people? Make our numbers. And so helping these ends communicate is the coach's job. And it's challenging. It's challenging. The top end has done it, they've lived it, and they just want to get the job done and get home. And the bottom end is like, well, it's 5:00, I need to go because I have else to do. And it can be very fractious at times. So
Yeah.
the coach in the middle has got to help all of these things work and keep the big boss happy by making the numbers. So if you have done the job, you're going to be able to feel all the different sides of this and come up with, you have to have a vision. We haven't gotten there yet. And forgive me if I'm, anticipating a question you're going to ask, but you have to have a vision of where you're going to go and have a narrative for getting people there so that they come along for the ride. Thank you.
Right. Right. So, would I be correct in saying that a coach actually is a bridge between experience on one hand and enthusiasm on the other? And, the job of a coach is to always make a compromise, or on that continuum between enthusiasm and experience, to always find that right spot that works at that particular time. And that I guess would take a lot of intuitive and experienced knowledge and wisdom as well. Yeah, so that's an interesting way of looking at it. Great.
It's a
So,
great
Ruchira,
question.
now
Seriously.
great, good, and a great answer
Yeah.
from you, Maggie. Thank you.
You had me thinking.
We have a mutual fan club going, guys. If you haven't seen it already. Ruchira, you talk very fondly of Bhutan, and when you were talking, your voice changed, and one could almost feel the emotions that you have with that week that you spent. Can you tell us what made it so special?
Talking about mutual fan clubs, yes, I mean, of course, it helped that it was Maggie who sent you that email, and then, of course, that triggered it all. But it was also an amazing experience, not just because I met some very interesting and very committed people. Uh, in fact, Maggie asked me that question the other day, and I had to think. And my answer was, I truly felt I made an impact. I was with a group of people, and it was called Women for Impact. And when we walked in there, it wasn't just a lot of us coming in with some really fancy and intellectually stimulating discussions and ideas. We truly wanted to go back home knowing that we had made an impact in this space. And we spent a lot of time with students of the JSW School of Law. It's Bhutan's first law school. I've talked about it in the book. And what truly captured me was how confident they were, how clear they were about their lives, and the fact that if they didn't have an answer about what they were doing next, that was okay too. And that made me think about the culture that the dean had created, a gentleman of Bhutanese origin who honestly had no background in education. And they had Michael Pale, who's the deputy dean, and he, of course, had a lot of experience. But together, they created this fantastic school where everything's okay. And I'm going back to what I said earlier. It was okay to fail. They created a safe space where students could speak their mind. So we spent a lot of time interacting with them. We spent a lot of time meeting some really, really dynamic Bhutanese women. And I think we spent so much time and energy just, uh, talking about things that we could do together as a team. And most of these, I guess, initiatives are focused on uplifting, elevating women and making them better and, making them leaders and just shining the light on them. And that made me feel just that I came out of a session and I said, okay, I should have done this a long, long time ago. So I have to thank Maggie for that. She's
Yeah,
actually one of the people who put the program together. So I think it's
right.
worthwhile just taking a couple of minutes and asking her to tell you about it.
Sure. So, Maggie, please do tell us a little more about the program that you put together. That feel that she was walking on air after she finished that.
On air.
I think we were all kind of affected by the altitude, actually. So
Yeah, it was very high.
to,
True.
it was way up there, and the landing is terrifying. I had
Oh,
to
yes.
close my eyes, but Women for Impact was extraordinary. And what was called an event ambassador for Ambassador Milan Vavir. You may remember her as the delegation led by former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to Beijing 25 years ago, where we started to look at how women were being treated and how women could be treated. And what we were trying was to help the future generations of Bhutanese women who were going to future attorney general, the future possible vice president, the future lawyers, and basically writing the laws, for a country that measures itself in terms of the gross happiness index, not GDP, something
Right.
completely different. And
Yeah.
if just to put it in today's terms, they've only had one death from COVID because they have been such a united society in terms of taking care of each other, which is sustainable. It's a sustainable approach to doing things. So just to put together a delegation, I reached out to people that I knew that I thought would be interested in going. And it was all about, would you give back? Would you be willing to give lectures? Would you be willing to support, give advice, and mentor, and help share on the outside? And if they came your way, would you be willing to help them out? And everybody that went did so. And even when they came to Washington, D.C., where I live, I put on an event for them so that they could talk about the law school, talk about what they're going to do, and try to keep going on. But really, the royal family is totally committed to the next generation. They're not trying to stay in power and perpetuate. They want to make sure that what they're doing continues. And this is, again, it reflects exactly in Ruchira's book. You serve, and then you empower, and then you move on. And so they're making sure that a good education is being given to the next generation. So what's not to support? That's completely my own personal philosophy. And in Ruchira's book, you see is self-knowledge. One, if you're going to be a good coach, you have to know who you are and what you stand for and what your values are. Super important. A self-inventory. Very important. Thank you.
Maggie, staying with you for another minute. One of the first things that Ruchira said when she talked about you and you being a mentor to her, she said, Maggie connected me to so many people. And that kind of, struck a bell in my mind, because the one area where we women lose out, women leaders lose out, is in this, what is called the old boys network. Uh, so can you share with us your views on how, and maybe I'm digressing a little from the core topic of coaching, but if the job of a coach is to make the leader more effective, networking or being part of a network is a big part of it. Can you share with us your views on how, A, whether it is really important, and B, how can a coach, and then how can women in general create their own women's network? We can't call it an old women's network by any
That won't work out.
It's
Before Maggie takes
it's a
on,
new girls network.
network.
It's a new girls
Before
network.
Maggie answers,
No, it's
before Maggie
absolutely, it's
answers,
critical. It's critical. It's absolutely critical to your success. It's a new girls network. Absolutely. And I don't know what I'd do without my support system. I have multiples, and they overlap like a Venn diagram. And I make sure that I check in, and I'm in the process of doing that now, post COVID. It does take time, and it takes commitment. And so you just set aside time in your calendar each day to check in with people and make sure they're doing okay. And my goodness, you have WhatsApp, you have LinkedIn, you have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have I don't use Twitter. Actually, I don't use Instagram. I don't use Twitter. It's just a little much to keep up with. You have emails, you have different qualities, different levels of relationships, and you just have to maintain those connections. And it's vital for a coach to stay in touch with people. It's really important, and I'm very committed to. So yes, I think it's very important.
So, just pressing you a little more on this, since this is an important aspect of leadership as well as coaching, can you share with us maybe a couple of practical tips for some of us who are watching this or are going to watch this show later? Can you share with us a couple of practical tips on how to get started and how to keep connected with your network and how to then keep growing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, I don't accept LinkedIn invitation I get. I am picky, because some people just want to link to me so that they can say, look who I'm. So I wait a little bit and I evaluate and I get to know the person or watch what's going on to see if I really do want to be same with Facebook. People, just seem to throw requests at you just because they want to throw requests at you. There has to be reason to connecting with the person, number one. Number two, if you're at work, and work is different now because work is cool. Before, when you were at an office, there were lots of events that you could go to. Now, I do participate in a lot more Zoom cocktail hours than I did before. I find these valuable. I do, and I'm picky about them. I get lots of Zoom invitations. Come to this, come to that. I go to some I don't go to. I look at what my priorities are and see if it's going to add value. I don't just show up to show up. I see if it's to fit into what I need to get done. I'm busy, and I have to make sure that it's going to add value. Also, am I going to add value, or am I just going to sit there like a frog on a lily pad and not do anything? I don't have time for that. I have a lot of that I'm trying to do. I'm writing articles and grading papers and doing other things. And I also have my 94-year-old mom that I want to get over to see. So I have grandchildren as well. Believe it or not, I do. So I'm a busy person. So you have to be protective of your time. People notice that. People notice that. And so you want to be a bit protective of your time. So you set your priorities. I don't know. I think New Year's resolutions are good things, because you sit and think about what you're going to do for the year. And then you just try to be consistent. And I actually, you'd laugh. In my bedroom, pasted on my door, is a list of priorities for the year. And I tick them off. I take a look, and it's subliminal after a while. If you wake up and you look at them, you go, oh, I'm kind of failing in this one. And then you double down and you make sure you're doing activities that are taking you in that direction. It's a conscious effort, and networking with a big N is a big part of that. So I was thrilled when Ruchira said, would you do this event with me? Of course I would. And she bribed me with a hardcover copy of the book, not a paperback. I got a hardcover one. And I said, I want it inscribed. She even inscribed it for me. I'm so happy. You have no idea. You have no idea. I'm so happy.
We can show it.
I have this too. Great. Good. So, Maggie, this is useful. This is very useful, and thank you for sharing this with us. Ruchira, do you want to add a little to this? Because you were saying something before I asked Maggie.
Yeah. Firstly, I should put that in context. The reason she has a hardback is because in India, we have a hardback. The book is just released in the US, UK, Europe, and Canada. And unfortunately, it's only a paperback. So if Maggie had to wait for it to release in her country, she would not get the real thing. Which of course is not signed either. But I guess what I was saying to you, Sonu, actually, was you put it rather beautifully. And this comes through in chapter 5. Connector managers is a very integral part of coaching. In fact, we call them connector managers. And the point I wanted to make was coaching is not just about that 30-minute conversation sitting across each other in a formal setting that you block in your calendar. Coaching is done in many, many ways. When you help the other person play to potential, you do that when you meet them in corridors, when the proverbial water cooler conversations, when you have those long taxi rides home, when you simply bump into somebody at a supermarket and you just strike a conversation and you give somebody feedback. That's also coaching. When you connect people to those that can help them the most, that's also coaching. When you give them exposure because your global boss is in town, and you say, come along with me for the meeting, and you position that individual who otherwise would not have gotten that opportunity, that's also coaching. So coaching comes in many ways, in many forms. The whole premise of coaching is that you're helping people shine, you're helping them do something that they normally would not have the ability to do. And that's what good leader coaches do. So to your point, yes, connecting is a very integral part of what we call coaching.
Yeah. So I see from the time that we are almost at the end of it, but before we end, I just have one question that this last year has been actually traumatic for almost everyone. But I can stick my head out and say that it's been a little more traumatic for women because they've had to manage the house, the family, the work, And earlier there used to be this little getaway where they could get out of the house and go to office and kind of get home for a little while. But here everything's been piled up, and I've had women who've said, the only thing I want to do is sleep. I am so tired, which is actually counterintuitive because you've been working from home. So coaching actually, in the coming years, at least for the next few years, how do you see coaching handling this kind of trauma, especially for women? This is about, coaching is it's more than just, work. It's about how to exist, how to handle the stress and the trauma. Question is open for any or both of you, and then we can wind up.
Maggie, do you want to
Ruchir,
go first? I can do it. I can do it, and then I'll do it. I, in fact, have a chapter. In fact, it's the afterword in the book. It's called "Coaching in Times of Corona," because the book started, as you probably know, Sonu. There's a full life cycle to your book. It was ready to go in about July of last year, but then our world changed and everything was shut, from printing presses to bookstores, etc. And of course, by the time it was ready for release, to make it more relevant and to make it really current, we did put that bit in. Uh, I will just say it very simply. Coaching has never been more important than it is now. A leader needs to now navigate these extraordinarily choppy waters with a very firm hand at the helm. And think about trust, think about resilience, think about empathy as being those rudders, right? Build those reservoirs of trust. Check in on your people, don't constantly check on them. Trust them that they're doing their job. To your point, our personal and our professional worlds are colliding. We don't have that space any longer. If you're breathing down the neck of the individual who works with you for you, just because you don't see them at office any longer, that's not coaching.
Yeah.
Empathy is important. Don't let people slack off, but please ensure that you cut them some slack. Because at the end of the day, we are not in the same boat. We're in the same storm, right? Some of us have ocean liners, and some of us are barely struggling with a lifeboat or a canoe. So the ability to recognize that, that's fantastic leadership, and that's real coaching. Trusting people to do their job, that's coaching as well. And the third bit, as I said earlier, is resilience. Give them that optimism and the confidence to move forward, that
Yeah.
life will someday be normal, and until then you're there to support them, specifically as you talked about those women leaders that are struggling. Many of us are struggling, some of us again are in better positions than others. Please be cognizant of the reality of the people that work with you and be empathetic to their needs.
Yeah, yeah.
Maggie, over
That
to
was
you.
good. So, Maggie, last word from you.
Oh, it's hard to add to that. Women really have carried the brunt. They've been the caregivers, they've been the social workers, they've been victims of domestic violence. Honestly, I don't, and many of them have dropped out of the workforce. I'm terrified because women have brought such dimension and infusion of creativity, of innovation to everyone's workforce that I'm worried that many won't return. That's my greatest fear. And so anything we can do, human to human, leader to coach to employee, mother or friend to other friend, anything we can do to support each other. I think that's my message is please support each other. A kind word, a word of encouragement. That's what I want to leave the audience. Just be kind to each other. These are times that our great grandmothers saw in 1918 when people were dying around them. So these are similar times. Just be kind to each other. Be kind
Yeah.
to each other. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so that I think those are very valuable words from both Ruchira and Maggie. And but I cannot end on this somber note. So let me just find something happy to end with. So Ruchira, since Bhutan is so important, just let's just wind up with some happy story
Okay,
about
okay.
Bhutan.
Okay. If I painted the picture of us, all being, very fired up about the cause, which we were, I must add to it that there were also very lovely evenings where I was walking on air, literally, but I also had some very interesting beverages that accompanied me. So we also tasted some fantastic local liquor. local liquor, which had never happened before. And that was a very interesting memory. I've carried it back with me, literally and metaphorically. I'm sure Maggie will tell you more about that another day.
Another
Not
day.
on not on camera, but yes, it was a celebration of women. It was a celebration of joy, and I think we
Great.
we all
Good.
did that.
Good, good.
It was
So I've enjoyed the conversation with both of you, and thank you for your time. And as just a roundup, I think all I do want to say is that while coaching has always been important, and being empathetic has been important, I think there is no better time than now when it is required, and especially kindness. I think that is a word that is my takeaway from this, that the world needs more kindness, the world needs more understanding, and going forward, if all the leaders who can then see themselves as leader coaches can just focus on these two qualities, kindness and empathy, I think a lot of the problems will not surface. They will be handled. So thank you all. Thank you both for this wonderful session. And we will say goodbye to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sona. Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Namaste.